The following segment is sponsored by Daniel A. White and Associates. It does not necessarily reflect the views of WDEL or Forever Media.
Well, it should.
The Rick Jensen Show on 101.7 FM, 1150 AM, WDEL, and streaming to your smart speaker and mobile device.
Look, I've been a happy camper client of Dan White and Associates for many, many years, and I highly recommend them. If you're looking at what do you do with retirement income, especially now, inflation, and who knows what's going to happen with interest rates at the 2 o'clock announcement, I believe. Dan Simon has been with Dan White and Associates for many, many years. Bright guy. Love talking with him because after the news at 1:30 on Wednesdays, one of the associates or Dan himself calls in and gives you some great advice and great tips because they follow the stuff that's annoying as all get out. Dan, thanks for being on, sir.
My pleasure, Rick. How are you today?
Peachy. So I saw this message that you sent to me regarding 401k rollovers, and I thought, well, that's pretty simple. I mean, you lose your job. I was going to say, yeah, you get fired because it's radio, you know. No, but you leave a company, and then you talk to whoever, is administering the 401k and say, okay, I'm going to roll that over here to Schwab or Fidelity or something, and they go, okay, and that's done from, administrator to administrator. You never touch the money, and I always thought that was just a pretty easy way to do it, but things have changed, huh?
Yeah, so, Rick, it's interesting. I came across an article recently amidst some of my reading, and it had to do with a report by the Government Accountability Office, which, GAO.
Yep.
I got to love that. Government Accountability Office and the Labor Department's fiduciary ruling. And it was really kind of talking about the importance and emphasizing how individuals comprehend and understand the different tax consequences regarding rollover options from their 401k plans when they leave that employer. So, currently the tax code requires the plan participant to provide the participant, with what's called a 402F notice when they separate from service. The problem is that document is supposed to actually explain their distributions, but it's been widely criticized for not being clear enough. So a little bit of an ambiguous document. So I just want to take a couple minutes and talk about some of the different options that individuals have when they either leave an employer or retire, and they have existing assets inside of a 401k plan through that old employer.
Sure.
So the first option is almost what I think a lot of people do, and that's absolutely nothing. And I don't mean that offensively anyway, but they go from one employer to another, and oh yeah, we had a 401k there over at Fidelity for 15 years, and we'll just leave it there, right?
Well, let me interrupt right there because I know people who've done that. And they did.
Oh, me too.
But they did it because they said, well, this is a pretty good plan, and they're satisfied with how it's going. I mean, me personally, I'm not a fan of Fidelity, but they have they're pleased with that, so they can leave it there, right?
Sure, just using a household name that most people recognize.
Oh,
right?
I know.
So if someone's happy with the plan, they do have the ability to do that. Some plans will actually force you out, depending upon the balance of the account. I think if a balance is less than about $7,000, a lot of times they'll force you to move the money out. They'll send you a taxable distribution, which most people don't want.
No.
Or they'll force you to roll it over to an IRA plan or a new 401k plan.
Yeah.
So that's the first option. Kind of leave it where it's at, and you take advantage of the continued tax deferred growth, and then you also have the option to take penalty free withdrawals from that account if you're considered retired once you're at the age of 55. Pricing of plans, investment options, they have their benefits as well. So that's option one. Keep it where it's at. Number two is what I see probably more often than not is rolling the money into an IRA plan. So an individual retirement account, 401k to IRA rollover is a non-taxable event. Keeps the tax status essentially as qualified or pre-tax money. And it gives you a whole lot broader range of investment options to choose from within an IRA as opposed to your traditional mutual fund suite that you have access to in the 401k plan.
I like the way you put that. I like you said the mutual fund suite.
You look at any 401k, and unless it's an open architecture type deal, you usually have 10 to 15 different mutual funds that you can choose from. So you've got a whole lot more options with an IRA than you do a 401k.
Sure.
One of the things I will point out, both if you leave a 401k or if you roll the funds to an IRA, when you attain the age for required minimum distributions, that's 73 for individuals born before 1960, and for those born 1960 or later, it's 75. RMDs are applicable to both the 401k from the previous employer as well as the IRA that you may have rolled the funds to. So you're not getting away from the RMDs there.
Well, I got to ask you a question about that, because I am very blessed that we do have some seasoned citizens as listeners to this program. So there are some people who think, okay, I got these, let's say, 5 401k plans, and they retire. And they say, well, I'll just take it all out of one. You can't just take it all out of one. You have to take out of all 5, don't you?
Yeah, that's correct, Rick. So you're actually kind of taking me to my next item, which was number 3. But I'll touch on that. So 401k RMDs. Yeah. You do have to satisfy one from each individual plan. With an IRA, let's say you have 3 different IRA accounts, you can pick and choose which account you want to draw it from. It's just got to satisfy the total amount of all 3 of those IRA plans. But 401ks are totally different. You got to satisfy a withdrawal from each one of those individual accounts. So a little bit of uncertainty there, right, as to what people do.
Yeah.
Number 3 is kind of going down that same vein, is rolling the old 401k into a new employer's 401k plan. And this is something that I generally would encourage someone to do if they are still working in their early 70s or mid 70s. They're gainfully employed. They like what they do. They got access to a 401k plan. And you know what? They're not an owner of that company. Well, then they still have the option to contribute to the 401k. They don't have to take RMDs from that account so long as they're actively employed with the company. So if someone can move a old 401k plan into that new plan, it kind of alleviates the tax burden of having to draw money out. So that's one option there. So essentially leave it alone, roll to an IRA, roll to the new 401k plan. And the last option, which generally I wouldn't advise, is to take a full cash out of the funds.
That's not good. No.
not good at all.
Wait. Hold it. Although, let's not get crazy now, but we don't know what's happening, with the tax rate. Likely not going to go down. So
I wouldn't bet that it's going down.
So, but then again, when you retire, you're likely in a lower tax bracket than when you're working. So I don't know if it would make sense to take that. Let's say you've got like 3 401ks, you just left them in there from 3 different employers, and do the cash out. Like you said, oh my gosh, it's dangerous. But what if you did that and put it into a Roth IRA?
Well, that's a totally different option. So cash out would just be paying the taxes and putting it in your pocket. Yeah. A conversion over to a Roth IRA, yes, it requires you to pay the taxes on it, but then it puts it in an account that's growing tax-free. So, yes, that's an option. But the problem with that, if you just do a pure cash out to say, I don't know, buy the dream home or the retirement home or fund a college expense, who knows what it might be.
Yeah.
If that occurs prior to 59 and a half, it could potentially put you in a position of a 10% early withdrawal penalty. It takes taxes into consideration over and above other income sources that you may have. On just a very simple $50,000 cash out example for someone prior to the age of 59 and a half, they could be subjecting themselves to, over $20,000 in penalty and taxes, assuming a 24% income tax.
But we started talking also about people who are older, people like 70 years old, whatever. And you're required to take money out at your 73 or 75, depending upon when you were born. So what if somebody, I know people who are 73 years old, and they're still going strong. They're working, they're having fun, even go on ski trips and stuff. I said, dude, 73. Back when my parents were that age, it's like, hey, I'm retired now. So what about those folks? Would moving into a Roth IRA make sense at all?
I always look at if someone's considering moving into a Roth IRA and converting funds over, there's a couple of things that I believe certainly should be taken into consideration. Number one is time horizon towards withdrawal. If you're going to take advantage of tax-free income and tax-free growth, obviously you want to have a deferral period as to when you're going to allow those funds to continue to grow and then when you anticipate drawing on them. So, yeah, I would look at somewhere from at least 5 to 10 years as to when you're going to start drawing on those funds. Number two is your current tax rate now versus where you potentially think your tax rate will be in the future. If you don't see your income, decreasing in the future, and being rather consistent, then maybe it does make sense. If you see your income going up in the future, maybe it makes sense now. I see situations where people do step back from the full-time occupation. Maybe they're working a hybrid type retirement where, they're working half as many hours, income's a little bit lower. Then that potentially may be a situation where, they want to take a look into whether a Roth conversion makes sense. Or, the other situation is, people sitting on a good chunk of cash in the bank. It's there as a safety net, but maybe it makes sense to utilize some of that cash to pay down some of the taxes, where we know where taxes are now relative to where they could potentially be 5-10 years from now.
I have a question.
Might be kicking in.
If you just tune in, it's Dan Simon, Dan White and Associates, financial planners specializing in retirement income. On the text line at 302-529-1017, is it worth enrolling in my employer's 401k? They match 25 cents per dollar up to 10% of my income.
I always say if somebody is going to match something that you're putting in, absolutely it makes sense to always put in up to the match. It's free money as far as I'm concerned. Right. How much over and above really depends upon an individual's budget, their objectives, time horizons. There's a lot that go into it, but I always encourage people to take advantage of free money. Why wouldn't you?
Agreed. I mean, that's 25% right there.
You got it.
Sweet. So, Sunday morning, 7 o'clock, Dan White on the money. What's on the money this Sunday morning on WDEL?
Dan is on the money Sunday morning, and he is going to be discussing a recipe for wealth. So I'll be curious to tune in myself and see what ingredients he's got in the mix for quote unquote wealth. A very broad word.
Saffron,
but I'm sure it'll be a great show.
Invest in saffron, very expensive. There, that goes in your recipe. Hey,
buy NVIDIA 5 years ago, right?
Oh, dude. So what's NVIDIA trading at right now?
A lot more than it was 5 years ago.
I had to take a look because I have a story about that. And
I think it's $143 a share or something. Maybe it's more than that.
It's split.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
$125.
Yeah, $125. I remember it went up to like 600, 700. Anyway, I remember going up to 600 and I said, I'm going to stop watching this because it's breaking my heart. I bought NVIDIA, quite a few shares, because it was $8 a share. Long time ago. What, 20 years ago, 15 years, something like that? And it was all because they were doing really well with the gaming chips. Now, that's something that I just did myself in one of my retirement accounts. A 401k plan that I rolled over. So
there you go. And the investment options inside the IRA, Rick, your own point.
So November 2020, I guess it was, it started dropping. I thought, oh, now what? And it went from like 312 to 308 to 305. And I was watching it. No, it was December. So the first week in January, I said, the Fed's going to raise interest rates. It's going to damage the stock market. And I sold so much of my stock. It was crazy. And for most of what I sold, it made sense and it worked out well. However, I sold NVIDIA at 288. Now, most people, including Warren Buffett, would say, dude, you invested. And I don't know if he would say dude, but he might say, dude. You bought it $8, you sold it $288. Good job. No, it went up to like $600 because I had no idea. And I was reading all sorts of reports, Seeking Alpha, Motley Fool, a number of others, as well as, Forbes and all that. I had no idea that they were that much into AI. I just never caught on that they were that much into it. And I didn't catch on that it was going to be such a big winner for the guys. Now, I don't mind that I did well with that company, but I would have had twice as much if I had just stuck it out and if I had known more about their investments in AI.
Yeah, I mean, Rick, I can't believe you just didn't anticipate the stock would go up 3,238% in 5 years. It'd be a $3 trillion company now. It just blows my mind.
I'm going to smack you. Actually, I'm not, because you're a pretty tough guy. You could take me, and I want to do that. Okay, this morning, the inflation reports, let's get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so, inflation report came out cooler than expected. So I would say that's relatively good news. The Fed's in the open market committee meeting today. It's been interesting this year. We're, what's June 12th now. 6 months ago, the expectation was 6 rate decreases, 3 rate decreases. Now we're down to maybe 2 rate decreases. So I'm looking at it. It's a waiting game. Everybody's, making their best guesses, saying, oh, it's a flip of the coin this way, flip of the coin that way. 70% chance rates will be cut twice this year. Everybody that I've read, and I think this is consensus, across the industry, Rick, is that rates are going to be higher for longer unless we truly see the actual economy, and not inflation, economy fall towards a recession. That I think would be the Fed's stimulus to, really take a look at rate cuts. But so long as they see inflation kind of within that 2% range, which is what they're shooting for, I personally think, and based off what I'm reading, it's going to be rates higher longer. And I don't necessarily think the word higher is correct, because rates have almost normalized if you look historically speaking.
So we've been talking about inflation since January 2021. Sure. Massive spending, creating money that this country doesn't have. That causes inflation. The Federal Reserve Bank in San Francisco that did the research issued a report recently saying inflation was not caused by greedy corporations. In fact, the price increases by those corporations in an inflationary period are the same across the board as they have been in the past. And inflation is caused by one thing and one thing only, and that's an oversupply of money. And only one entity can create money, and that's the federal government. And we are at about 130% of our gross domestic product in debt. So inflation. And I was looking at what happened today in relation to January of 2021 with inflation. We used to be at 18% inflation since January 2021. They were at 19. Now we're at 20%. Overall, groceries are still over 30% higher, about 34% higher than they were in January 2021. Other commodities and expenses are higher than that 20%. But that's where we are overall, at about 20% inflation since 2021. It's there are millions of people living right now who never experienced that sort of thing. So, like you mentioned, the Fed's going to announce at 2 o'clock today, it's going to be during Delaware's Afternoon News with Chris Carl, what they're going to do regarding interest rates. And like you said, I've read a lot of analysts saying that they don't think they're going to change anything at all right now. What do you think?
I'm on the same page with that. If anything, very small reduction. I don't think there's going to be a rate change right now. Maybe one, maybe two, over the next 6 months. But I think they're going to keep things probably in line with where they're at right now. But yeah, I mean, you look back at some of the core things and how it affects, your listener base and the people that I see on a day-to-day basis who are, approaching or in retirement. Yeah, you go to the grocery store, everything's 30% more expensive than what it was.
Terrible.
Is that really what they're reporting on a 2% in inflation increase or whatever it is?
Well, they actually exclude groceries sometimes because they're so volatile. So it depends on what report you're looking at.
Yeah, I think rates will stay pretty consistent. I came across an interesting article. We talk about the government, printing money, creating money, and it's just feeding the problem, and it exacerbates and gets worse to the point where we're at right now with how inflation has been. They said it was going to be transient. It wasn't transient. It's still here.
Yeah.
It's impacting the way people go about their lives. But a quote I saw, it's kind of like, you feed a hangover by continuing to drink, and ultimately it catches up with you. And
my God.
That's where we're at right now, right?
I hear you.
Terrible scenario, but
we got to get to the news. We got to get to the news, Dan. It's well phrased. Dan Simon at Dan White and Associates. These guys guys are great. You give them a call regarding financial planning and retirement income at 888-690-8820, 888-690-8820.